Hello my friends and welcome to Jessie James Beads. I hope you're having a beautiful day thus far, no matter what it is you've been up to. So, as ever, I'm keen to hear the weather report from where you are. Also, give me a quick wave so that I know that you can see and hear me and that technology is indeed my friend tonight. In the shop where I work, technology has not been my friend today. Things that were supposed to scan didn't, but never mind. We move on through. So today we are going to be working with some absolutely glorious Pantone 2023 pearl style strands, and there is a colour to suit every mood. I've popped links down in the video description to both the strand I'm going to be working with, which is hot. So this is Pantone 2324 in red orange. A fiesta of fire, sunshine, summer heat, carnival, festival, beautiful, just glorious strand. That's the one that we're going to work with today. However, there's a second link in that video description, and that will show you all of the different Pantone 2023 pearl style strands. And I was just gazing through them, and I've got 4 or so examples on my desk to share with you, but there's so many colours, so many options, one for every mood, one for every choice, one for certainly every day of the week and beyond. So would you like a quick sneaky peek on the board whilst I wait for people to come and say hello? Have a look at what we're going to make, what we're going to work with, and a couple of the other options that are available in the Pantone 2023-24 strand collection. So we're going to be working today with this little beauty. A fiesta, a festival, an absolute delight of heat and fiery oranges. Red orange is a very apt description. There's lots of sparkle, there's lots of sumptuous, satiny, smooth pearl style. There's glitz and glamour with those crystals. We've got spacers, we've got rhinestone encrusted clay beads. What an absolutely glorious strand. We've also got, just as a little aside, a selection from the collection. Persian jewel in this soft, subtle blue, but with just a hint of lilac underneath. I think that's glorious. I'm not sure which is my favourite. I was lucky enough to receive everything that you see on the desk to bring an example to you with the red orange strand, but I think this one is definitely one of my absolute favourites. So there's Persian jewel. Let's have a look at what else there is. Silver birch. Sharon is in. Hello my darling, where are you in from today and what's the weather like? Silver is an endlessly classic colour to work with. Now don't feel that you can only work with silver colour wire with a strand like this. Do feel free to mix up your metals. It will give you a slightly different feel, a slightly different flavour. Silver birch is another hot favourite. Absolutely love that. Let's pop that over to the side. I've got Eclipse as well as an example. Now this is very, very much a me strand. This is glorious. It's deep, but it's not flat matte black. Those faceted rondelles have got shimmer. Absolutely gorgeous, sultry feel to those pearl style beads. Les is in from Michigan. 3.5 hours of storms last night, high winds, and the airport is closed. Roads are flooding out of Detroit. Everybody stay super safe, my friends. Stay safe, and I hope that you remain largely unaffected. Sharon's in Alexander City, where it's really hot. Liz loves the lavender strand. They are all absolutely glorious. I love them all. But this is a beaut. This is very, very me. I definitely team it with any of the other colourways. Coconut milk, wow, that doesn't go anywhere near describing how gorgeous it is. Good afternoon, Deb is in Sanicha in Pennsylvania, where it's cloudy and rainy. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that, my darling. Hopefully it will soon improve for you. So coconut milk, you have got these soft, not quite ivory tone pearl style beads, but you've also got these beautifully, not frosted, but opaque white to ivory. Absolutely gorgeous. How's the sound for everyone else? Kate's experiencing some issues. Is that across the board, or is it just local to Kate? We've got reasonable weather today. It's been incredibly warm for us anyway, but we don't have any storms, so I'm not sure if that's a local to me issue or if it is local to you. Let me know. Liz can hear me fine. That's good to know. Anybody else having issues, drop me a comment and I will do my best to poke the thing and see if it will do something different for you. So coconut milk is another one of the example Pantone 2324 strands. Deborah has perfect sound too. Thank you so much, Deb. Good to know. It may be a local issue for you, Kate. I don't know that I can do anything to assist. I always run a test before broadcasting and the sound was absolutely crystal clear on my end. Fingers crossed you can hear and see enough. What I could do is write a note if I add dimensions on, just so that you don't miss out on the live creation. So there's coconut milk. We are going to work with red orange Pantone today, and it is an absolutely gorgeous. Can you see the light that it's casting down onto the board? It's kind of tricky to see because the strand itself is in the way, but it just gives this beautiful stained glass effect as the light flashes through those beautiful orange beads. So I'm going to be cutting that in a moment, which is always a thrill. I'm going to show you now the two examples that I used Viva Magenta and High Vis for. I think those are both fairly accurate descriptors. So this is a very simple to achieve stacking bangle, and we don't use all of the beads. We're only going to use the beads that easily slide onto our 18 gauge wire. I'm going to grab a little bit of note paper and I'm going to write down. We're going to use 18 gauge wire. That's just for Kate. We're going to use approximately 20 inches of that 18 gauge wire. There you go. I hope that is helpful for you, my darlings. So Viva Magenta, we used probably about half of the beads from the strand. And High Vis, again, around about half of the beads. I'll show you what I have left. That's just a naughty jump ring that shouldn't be in there, just ignore that. So I actually think the colours team together really, really well. It's very feisty. Beautiful pink, orange, yellows in there. So that's all left over from this project. So there's plenty that you can do with those. But what we're looking to do is use the larger hold beads from this collection. So if I pop this up into the corner, I'm going to show you two ways to make this little connector. This is a little bit more intense and interesting, but I'll show you a simplified version as well in case you don't feel that this is for you. So I think it could be for everyone. I hope it's for everyone, but there's just a couple of varieties there for you to have a think about. So let's cut this gorgeous strand. So as I mentioned before, I'm working with red orange, and I have popped that link down in the video description. Let's open up the little clip, get that away to the scrap, and then I will reserve, as I normally do, the ticket details so that I can always remember the colour or the details of what I'm working with. So let's just pop that up so that you know what we're working with. So I'm just going to trim away at one end, and there we go, just the one that got away from me. Just recorded a video for you coming out next month using the new Goddess strands, and I am so excited for you to see them, to witness the pieces that I've made, because I think that they're really, really beautiful collections. So that will be coming up very, very soon. So these are the beads that we have freed off from the red orange collection, and we're going to see which of those are going to work on the wire of choice. So I have now 18 gauge round wire. It's German style, and I've gone for 20-inch length. What we're going to do is see what works. So I think that these will probably go on. The bigger ones, I think the clay ones will probably go on. I think the spacers will probably go on. I'm almost certain that these fabulous faceted rondelles are going to be there for you. So let's add in a couple of these spacers on either side. We're going to have little collections and clusters of beads. So I've got rhinestone crystals here. And then let's see what else we can add in. I think I've got 2 daisy spacers at either end. And if I can, I'll get some more of those larger pearl style beads on. So let's have a look. What I'm going to do to make my life easier is to round one end of the wire, and that's just to stop the beads from falling off the end. Then I'm going to just warm through the whole thing for a moment. Just once or twice is sufficient, and then we're going to start trying to add those beads. So let's pop on the daisy spacer and see if one of these larger beads will work. That one seems to be quite happy with the situation, which is always a winner. So you don't have to have little clusters. You can go for individual beads or sets of 3. I quite like having little clusters of beads though, so I think that's what I'm going to do. I might have an individual one just here. Hopefully that other large bead will also fit. And then we're going to get that faceted, beautiful, glorious orange rondelle. And we're just going to feed these on. Now, I prefer to go for a symmetrical pattern. You can go for completely randomised beads if you prefer. Sissy is going to watch on replay. Wanted to say hi, enjoy the live, everyone. Thank you, Sissy, my darling. How's the sound quality where you are before you sign out, my love? Let's add in another little cluster of beads on the other end. Sometimes the pearl style beads need a little bit of a twist. Good morning from Margot. Good morning, Margot. I hope that you are well and that life is treating you fairly today. The clay beads tend to have really good apertures. They're not usually an issue of any kind. So let's just have a look and see if this all works. I'm going to take these all off again in a second. Let's just get them on to make sure that they do indeed fit. The reason I didn't do that before the show is because I wanted you to see the entire strand. Sissy has no problems with the sound. That's good news. So all of the beads that I want to work with fit perfectly well, which is fabulous. We've got a really nice collection just here. So I'm now going to de-strand them and pop these other beads out of the way for use in a different project later. So I need to scooch all of that off, try to retain the order if I can, but don't fret about it. If that doesn't work, then that's absolutely fine. My dogs are going nutso in the background. Sorry about that. I think there's somebody that's come to the door. We're not going to worry about it. We're just going to carry on regardless. So let's pop that centerpiece in. I've now got my little clusters of beads all ready to go back on the wire in just a moment. I'm going to show you the next part of the tutorial, which is to make a spring. Now here's an oversized variation of that spring. And I'm going to use the same wire again, but this time from the reel. I am going to employ my multi-step bail making pliers. Everything's going well for Margot. That's brilliant. All is well, my darling. Thank you. Sorry about the little doggy flavoured interlude there. I hope you couldn't hear them too much. There's the spring that we're going to make. Now, this is going to form spacers between each of those little clusters of beads. So you can choose whichever size you think is going to work for you. As a matter of interest, the one that I'm showing you here was the number 5 size, so the second largest. And I think the pieces that I made were probably on the number 4. So let's grab that wire. It's still on the spool. This again is 18 gauge wire. And it's round, German style. I've gone for gold colour. Now I do prefer to get a little bit of warmth into that leading section just to begin with. And what we're going to do is start making some springs. Let's make a spring on the number 4 level of my multi-step bail making pliers. Debbie's in from Oregon. Hello, my love. How's the weather for you today? So what we're going to do is trim away that end section just so that it's nice and neat and tidy. Good place to start. and then we're going to wrap around number 4. Now this can be a little bit repetitive, so if your wrists are feeling a little bit under the weather, just go steady and do a little bit at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm wrapping around that number 4, trying to create a nice neat coil, keeping those wires really close together. Now the joy of working with one of these instead of a long post is that you can simply allow that to slide off at any time. So I'm going to continue working around that number 4 spindle on my bail making pliers until I have plenty of turns. Now what I would say is you can do 6 turns and then cut the wire, 6 turns, cut the wire, 6 turns, cut the wire. I'm saying 6 because it makes a really lovely usable long spring. But another thing that you can do if you want to make multiples of these without spending lots and lots of time, you can just make one great big long spring, and I'm just going to make a demonstration piece for you now. I've already prepared some springs for later on. Trim away at the end. And you can see I used about half of my remaining wire to create this. And what you can do now is find your start point. If you've got good eyes, you can count 6 rotations of the wire and just spread that out slightly like so. And because we warmed that wire just a little bit beforehand, it's relatively easy to create that little separation. And once you've got that little separation, what we're going to do is trim really neatly with our flush cutters. I'm going to pop the rest of this spring out of the way, but what you're ideally looking for is to have a repeatable number of coils, a repeated number of times that it's gone around, and then you're looking to fill gaps. So we'd need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 springs. As luck would have it, I have 6 springs prepared, but I'm going to show you now with this piece of coiled wire how to make that spring come alive. So what we're going to do is, if you have even the shortest thumbnails, you can pop them inside the ends of the spring, fingernails on the other side, so you're looking to grip a piece at each end, and it will just very, very softly open out. If you want to practice with a 20 gauge wire until you get the technique, that's no bad thing. So what we've got now is a spring, and ideally you want all of your springs to be the same length and the same size. You can open them out a little bit further if you want to make a larger bangle. You can use the spring itself to make the space more, as it were, and in that way you're only using half a strand of beads, and you've got beautiful possibilities, endless possibilities of making lovely little drop earrings to match your stacking bangles. Imagine getting the whole collection and having a piece of jewellery for the wrist and a pair of earrings to go with, or a pendant if you don't have pierced ears, anything along those lines. You've got matched jewellery just from the one strand, and you can be really, really well done. Very hot, says Debbie in Oregon, and full of sunshine. Well, that's lovely. I'm happy for you. As long as it's not too hot, my darling. Or at least if you've got air conditioning. So if you see, I'm rotating the wire around, and you can see the cut end. The cut end is just here. I'm going to bring that up slightly to the camera. There's the cut end. What I'm looking to do is to grip the end about 1/3 of the way around that circle. So here's the cut end, 1/3, 2/3, all the way. So if I grab that 1/3 of the way along and just very, very firmly twist that end over, what that's going to do is act as a stopper to stop any of the smaller beads going inside that spring once we start threading it onto the main core wire. These bangles are so cute. I love the wire wrapped springs. I love making springs. It's really therapeutic, and if one goes a little bit wrong, you can always squish it down a little bit, or you can open it back up a little bit. Kate says it's only 95 today in Las Vegas. Rather cool. Only 95, she says. Gosh, we'd all be having a little bit of a lie down if it was 95 degrees here. So again, we're looking at the other end of our spring now, and I'm going to find 1/3 of the way from the point at which the cut end occurs, and I'm just going to tilt that over the middle. Now, I don't want it to be dead centre, which is why we're only using 1/3 of that wire. It skirts just off the side of that central segment. So I'm going to pop this out of the way and bring in some relatively matched springs I made ready for the demonstration. So you can always, the joy of repeating is that you can go back and you can look at that again if you need to. So what we're going to do is we, at the beginning, put a little loop on one end of our 20 inches of that 18 gauge wire, and that's just to stop everything flying off the end. So we're going to start stranding on those beads again, and if you remember, the reason I tried all of these beads is to make sure that they did happily go on to the gauge of wire I've chosen to use. So I have gone for a daisy spacer, a large pearl, a daisy spacer, and then I'm going to add in one of my springs, and these were all made in exactly the same way. And I'm looking to, I should have shown you that, looking to go inside the end just like so on the fat side of that end section that we bent over. Slide the wire up through the centre so that it sits nicely onto our core wire. So let's just have that single bead next, and you'll see that because we bent those end sections over, the bead will not then fall inside the spring, which if you're working with these beautiful faceted gorgeous rondelles, sometimes they'll fit dependent on what piece of the bail making pliers you chose to use. There we go. Margot says she's going to Las Vegas in November for a girls trip. Amazing. Margot says it's beautiful here in Northern California. It doesn't usually get above 65, but lately it's been in the 70s. I love it. Oh, good for you. That sounds just right, actually. 70-odd degrees sounds perfect. So now we've got another bead. We need another spring. And you'll notice what I've done is I've varied. I've got a cluster of beads and metallics, a spring, then a single bead. Then I'm going to go for another spring. Then I'm going to go for another cluster. Let's just move that out of the way so you can see clearly. Debbie says that's beautiful. Thank you very much, Debbie. That's very kind of you. And Kate says, Margot, you'll have an amazing time. I may have paraphrased. Enjoy. Let's add in another one of those springs, and I'm not overly worried about letting any of that go because I put the loop on the end of the wire to prevent too much excitement. Beads do tend to like to go crashing all over the place, as they do in at least two of my most recent videos. One of them, I left it in the final edit because I loved the noise of the beads escaping across my table so much, and I thought maybe you would too. So let's go for a spacer, and then we've got one of these festooned clay beads, another rhinestone wheel spacer, and then we need another one of those springs, and you can sit and make these springs to your heart's content. Now you'll notice that I popped them onto the lid of a Jessie James Beads bead pot. If you sit them all in together, they sometimes interlock. It's not terribly difficult to not allow them to stay like that. It's relatively easy to unlink them. However, when you're doing a live demo, it pays to just be a little bit more prepared. So let's put in the single feisty orange faceted rondelle, the last one of my spring beads, and then the last little trilogy of beads at the far end of the design. Now I have mirrored mine. You don't have to. You can go for completely random collections if you prefer. Let's pop that all the way through. So again, before anything goes running around, I'm going to put a little small loop on the other end of that 20 inches of wire. Let's bring that up over the top. Now, because I always warm my wire before I work, if we get short of wire, we can always use those loops. So be gentle with your wire and it will be flexible, basically. It can help you out in a pinch. So I told you I was going to show you two different ways of creating this hook and eye. I'm going to show you the slightly more exotic way, which is this double looping clasp on one end, but it's going to be exactly the same at the other end, which is basically a wrapped loop. Think of it like a very beautiful eye pin. So that's where we're going to start. Let's just drop all the beads down and they'll sit against that loop without any drama and get them off the desk. So I'm just going to unfurl this end wire and give that a quick straighten, because you never know, we might need it. So at the end that is furthest away from the hook, we're going to create a wrapped loop. Now I've got my bail making pliers here, so I might as well use them. If you're going to go for this double hook, you'll need quite a large hole for that to fit through nicely, because I like to put a little kick on the end there. So we're going to create a loop. First of all, I can say words. About 2.5 inches from one end, I'm going to go for a right angle, and then I think I'm going to use number 4 on those bail making pliers to rotate that around and get a lovely smooth round form. Draw that wire over the back and then pop them back out of the way. So if you want to make that slightly more oval, you absolutely can. I like to see them nice and round. I'm going to support that round form whilst I bring the wire neatly, and during this we're going to put quite a lot of intention and pressure into that wire. I want to get a good 4 wraps around that end section before I trim the tail away flush. And there's always a little bit left over, so that was the bit that we turned over. We didn't need it in the end, but it always pays to have extra. So what I would like to do now is flatten down that last little section and straighten up the loop so that it's flat and sits equally on the end of the design. So there's a tiny technique that I would like to share with you. Don't know if you can actually see, yes you can beautifully, the end is slightly elevated away, and it has to be slightly elevated away so that we can cut it smoothly. What I'm going to do is put my pliers over that and then move the pliers around in the same direction that the wire is travelling, over the top, and what will happen is you will be able to fold that down smoothly so it is no longer a risk of catching on your clothes, your jewellery, anything like your body, anything like that. So we're going to zip line all of those beads down into position, and at this stage we're just going to check to see how this looks for size. So you can use a mandrel if you like, but what I'm going to do is just very, very gently form that core wire into the end size and shape that I'm looking for. So you can custom design these for a particular client or for yourself, designed to fit snugly on the wrist, or you can have them a little bit larger if you prefer. So let's just pop that on and see what sort of space we've got. I actually think that's going to be perfect. However, let's just pop that down for a second and I'll grab one of my stunt pieces, one of the stunt springs. If you have made the design and you don't want to take any of the beads off, you or your client particularly enjoy how the beads look, but it's either too large or too small, you can very subtly adjust each of the springs as you go round. Now, one way of doing it is to put your finger either side, and I'll show you on the piece. Put your finger either side, either end, and just gently compress that down, like so. Give it a few little bounces and it will become smaller, or if you need to fill more space, you can very gently open them out. So again, finger, nail and thumbnail at either end, very softly pull them apart, and if you pulse gently you'll find that you can create a really nice smooth movement, keeping those even gaps between each coil of that spring. Let's pop that one back out of the way. So we're going to start by creating this slightly more elaborate hook to fit through. Margot says, will this be available to watch again at a different time? Yes, it will stay here on Facebook on replay. If you go to the Jessie James Beads page and then look at the videos tab, you'll be able to see it quite easily. Also, it will go onto the blog or onto YouTube within a few days, so you'll be able to watch it there at leisure also. So don't worry, if the sound or the Wi-Fi is being tricky for you today, then there's always an opportunity to catch up later. So what I want to do now is to decide whereabouts I want the hook to exist. So if I hold everything just subtly like this, that looks to be about the right size. So this is the point at which I want the hook to end in this position. So I need to allow another inch past that point to allow for all of these curvy bends to occur. So I'm going to bend the wire over 1 inch past the point at which I'd like it to connect. It's just slightly more than 1 inch, I think. So let's just bend that over and back towards itself, like so. And then just squish that down. So if I flip this over onto its side, you can see that we've got this quite gentle racetrack hairpin bend at the moment, and that's what we're looking to keep. If you want, you can tighten that up slightly. I'm just going to grab a second pair of chain nose pliers. I'm just going to hold across that segment and just subtly close this up. So a squish and a squish like so, and I've closed that up very, very gently, but not too much. So what we're going to do now is bring that wire all the way back towards your last bead. Let's pop this out of the way. So what we need to do now is to make a bend in the tail of wire that's coming away from the design. Let's just hold that out of the way. And because if I hold it in this orientation, I've got the wire coming out of the bead design going up to the top of the screen. It comes back down on the right hand side. So what I want to do is to grip the tail of wire that is not attached to the design. And this is a little bit less than ½ an inch from the last bead. So ½ an inch away from where it crosses over. And I'm going to pull that strongly across the wire. So I'll show you that again. Strongly across like so. And what we're going to do with this tail wire now is to wrap it firmly around the core of the design. So one of the ways you can do that without distorting the wire that you've already changed into what is going to become the hook is to just very firmly pinch across that section. And I'm going to draw this all the way around. Now it's quite a long tail of wire that I'm working with, so you probably won't need to manhandle it quite so much, but I'm going to rotate that around until I have filled this gap up. Now again, putting the intention into the wire will mean that you'll end up with those lovely neat turns. You can go all the way up, or if you think that you've got enough going on, we can just stretch out those beads to fill the gap. I feel like I'm not giving you value for content, just watching me rotate that wire around over and over again. If you don't have enough wire for whatever reason, you can cut away to the last inch. So I've got a good couple of inches of wire still remaining. But if I trim that to 1 inch, I'm going to show you an emergency fix. Let's say you've got a little bit of bare wire between your coiling and the last bead that you want to see. So we're going to make a little coil, rotate around from the end of the wire. You can see we've got that little circular form. Open that up until it sits neatly, and then I'm just going to keep moving until I get a nice little coil, which I'm going to use to fill the gaps. If I show you that sideways, you've got the coil sitting up at a jaunty angle. I'm just going to push that down so it sits over the top of what was bare wire, and we've now filled that bare wire. So we've got a little bit of a coil going on there. So to make this lovely double hook design, first of all I'm just going to tidy up this line here. It's sticking out a little bit further than I want, so I'm just going to very, very gently modify that until it sits a little bit more neatly, like so. And then I'm going to start to create the hook. So you can see we've got the inside of the bracelet, which comes underneath here, and then you've got the outside of the bracelet, which has got this little coil gap filler up at the top. So just past where we made that nice coiling section, I'm going to push the hook down towards the inside of the bracelet. So if I show you that from the inside angle, you can see where we're going to go with this. We're creating that hook shape now. You don't have to have a professional mandrel, you don't have to have a professional bail maker, but what we're looking to do is to bring that hook back and around, draw the wire over the top of the bangle. I'll show you that on the side. So we've made an elongated hook. Now you can use round nose pliers if you prefer for the next section, but I am going to use my ever trusty bail makers. I might just make that hook slightly smaller, otherwise my bangle's going to be a little bit large. So to do that, I'm going to put the bail makers in and just lift that hook very, very gently, put some warmth into it, and then rotate away from me to make the hook slightly smaller. It's a bit of a funny shape now, so I'm going to retro fix that, push that down over the top, and we have fixed it. So I like to have this little curl back on the end of my hook. It gives you an extra added sense of safety because you do need to have quite a specific angle to get this through. So you've got basically what is essentially a hook and loop. So in order to make that, I'm going to flip the design over because I'm right dominant, it's easier for me to manage, and I'm going to use the number 2, which is quite small. I think it's about 3mm. I'm not 100% certain, honestly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to curl up the very end of that hook segment. I'm just going to flip that over and rotate it all the way around. Let's remove those pliers and we've got that nice little hook. So to finish off, I'm just going to gently pinch that down before I bring that back into position. Now that is the slightly more complex way of creating a hook and a loop. Your other alternative is to go for a simplified hook on the other end. Now I would say that hammering is a definite bonus if you're going to use 18 gauge wire to create a hook. It's basically the same thing but much more simple. So if you imagine we've got all of our bracelet design around this end, we've got a loop on the other end, a wrapped loop on the other end, and we're just coming out here with that single piece of wire. So obviously we don't need anywhere near as much as we did to create that double hook design. So all we're going to do is grab our favourite pliers just past the point at which the last bead exists, push that wire towards the centre of the bangle. I'm going to flip the design over now, and then using a pencil, round form, whatever it is that you have to hand, we're going to draw the wire all the way back towards the remainder of the bracelet. If I hold this in position, you'll see how they're looking similar to one another. So that goes over the top there, and then we can create a very, very tiny loop on the end. Pull that back over the top. It's almost like an earring finding at this stage. I'm just going to trim away the very last little bit of excess wire, and then I will pinch this down like so. Squish it up in exactly the same way, and you've got a simple hook to go through the wrapped loop that's at the other end. Now what I would say is you might need to play around with the angle until it sits perfectly for you. What you'll find, Liz, if you're going to use the single wire, is that many of the beads don't particularly like a 16 gauge. So I would go for an 18 gauge and then hold on to your hollyhocks. Just take the very, very last little bit, grab your chasing hammer, put your fingers in your ears, darlings. You ready? Now what you will find with much hammering, if you go a little bit casually at it like I did just then, that was quite a casual hammer, the design will open up slightly, but once you have hammered it, you can pull that slightly back into position, cross it over, straighten it up, give it a squish, and you have a functional hook and loop closure. My preference is to go for the double because you get much more strength in your 18 gauge wire using that double loop design. Let's just show you those other 4 strands that I had earlier on in case you missed it. You can see I've worked today with red orange, demonstration pieces in Viva Magenta and high visibility, but I've also got coconut milk to show you. I've got eclipse to show you. I have got silver birch to show you. And then I've got, last of all, Persian jewel to show you. All of them are beautiful. I had a quick look on the website before I came to air. Let's wake the computer up. Hello, it's still me. And there was an absolute plethora of choices of different colours, of different emotions, built in to the Pantone 2324 Pearl Style Strand collection. I'm sure that you will find one that you love. I know that there's plenty in here that I love. If your bangle is too big, before you make that clasp, you can squish those springs down a bit. If disaster strikes, you make the clasp and it's way too big, compress the clasps and simply remake the wrapped loop at the other end. You can usually get away with about 1.5 inches to make a very simple wrapped loop with a reasonably sized loop hole, and a couple of wraps of that 18 gauge wire will be secure. So quite often there's a way of fixing things. However, threading that all back on again isn't too much of a drama. Making the springs, get the hang of that, get them to be all the same size, the same dimension, the same number of wraps around whatever round form you're using, and have lots of fun. And don't forget to tag us on all of your different social medias. Give us a hot little JJB, a hot little Jessie James Beads hashtaggery. I don't really understand social media, I'm not going to fib. It's not something that I get at all. I just come here and hang out and teach jewellery. I hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial. Stacking bangles for days. Literally, so many colours for days. Well, I hope that you've had as much fun as I have. It's been my absolute pleasure to be here with you at Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem Hawkes, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks on a Thursday, same time, same place here on Facey, or later uploaded to the blog and YouTube. Have yourself an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Mwah. Bye for now.